You've probably done this before. You're standing in the shower when an argument from 2 years ago suddenly starts playing in your head again. This time you say the perfect thing. This time they finally understand. This time you win. Then the water turns cold and you're back in reality. 10 minutes are gone. And the strangest part isn't that it happened, it's how real it felt while it did. Psychology has a name for what your brain was actually doing in there, and once you understand it, you'll never look at your imagination the same way again. This is the psychology of people who are addicted to imagining fake scenarios. Most people don't intentionally sit down and decide to imagine fake scenarios. It happens automatically. A small comment reminds you of something, a text message goes unanswered, a memory appears, and suddenly your mind is building an entire scene around it. What's fascinating is that the brain treats many imagined experiences surprisingly similarly to real ones. Psychologists often refer to this as mental simulation. The human brain evolved with an extraordinary ability to imagine possibilities before they happen. Before an athlete competes, they often visualize success. Before a public speaker steps onto a stage, they mentally rehearse. Before a difficult conversation, most people imagine different outcomes. In moderation, this ability is useful. It helps us prepare, it helps us plan, and it helps us solve problems. But for some people, the simulation never really turns off, and that's when imagination slowly becomes a habit. The first type of fake scenario is probably the most common, the replay scenario. This is the person who keeps revisiting something that already happened, a conversation from yesterday, an awkward moment from years ago, or a disagreement they can't stop thinking about. Except each replay is slightly different. This time they say the perfect thing. This time they defend themselves better. This time the other person finally understands. From the outside, it looks like overthinking, but psychologically, something else is happening. The brain is searching for resolution. Human beings dislike unfinished emotional experiences. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik Effect, the tendency for unfinished situations to remain active in our minds. The conversation may be over, but emotionally, the brain hasn't finished processing it, so it keeps reopening the file again and again, hoping for closure. The second type is future fantasy scenarios. These are usually much more pleasant. Someone imagines becoming successful, getting recognition, finding the perfect relationship, or achieving something they've wanted for years. For a few moments, everything feels possible, the future feels exciting, and the emotions feel real. Psychologist Jerome Singer, often called the father of daydreaming research, spent years studying why people drift into imagined worlds. He found that daydreaming can act as a form of mental rehearsal, allowing people to explore possibilities before they happen. In many cases, imagination helps people prepare for future goals and challenges. And that's exactly why these scenarios can become addictive, because the brain rewards imagined success with many of the same emotional benefits as progress itself. For a brief moment, you get the feeling without doing the work, the recognition without the risk, and the achievement without the uncertainty. This doesn't mean future imagination is bad. In fact, it can be motivating. The problem appears when imagination starts replacing action, when thinking about the future becomes more satisfying than building it. And this is where many people get stuck without realizing it. They mistake emotional movement for actual movement. Their mind is constantly traveling somewhere, but their life remains exactly where it is. The imagination gave them the arrival without the journey, and journeys are the only part that actually changes you. Then there is the third type, and this one is often the most exhausting, the disaster scenario. This is where the brain imagines everything that could go wrong before anything has happened. What if they reject me? What if I embarrass myself? What if I fail? What if something goes terribly wrong? The mind starts preparing for situations that don't exist yet. Psychologically, this connects to what researcher Michel Dugas called intolerance of uncertainty, the tendency for some minds to treat not knowing as a threat that must be neutralized before it can be tolerated. The brain generates worst-case scenarios, not to be pessimistic, because it believes that imagining the danger in advance gives it some control over the outcome. But the problem is that uncertainty cannot be solved completely. So the brain keeps generating more scenarios, more possibilities, and more outcomes, as if enough preparation could finally eliminate risk. But it never does, because the next scenario always appears, and then the next, and then the next. Now, here's where the psychology becomes much more interesting. These three scenarios look different on the surface. One is about the past, one is about the future, and one is about fear. But underneath, they often share the same purpose: control. The brain dislikes uncertainty. It dislikes unanswered questions. It dislikes emotional ambiguity. And fake scenarios create something reality rarely provides: control. Inside your imagination, everything makes sense. You know what happens next. You know what everyone says. You know how the story ends. Reality doesn't offer those guarantees. Real conversations are messy. Real relationships are unpredictable. Real life doesn't follow scripts. And sometimes, the more uncomfortable someone becomes with uncertainty, the more attractive imagination becomes. Not because they want to escape reality, but because reality asks them to tolerate not knowing, and that can feel incredibly uncomfortable. This is why some people become addicted to imagined scenarios, not because they have powerful imaginations, but because the scenarios are serving an emotional purpose. They provide certainty, control, closure, and safety, at least temporarily. But here's the contradiction most people never realize. Imagination itself is not the problem. In fact, imagination is one of the most powerful abilities the human brain possesses. It allows humans to innovate, create, plan, dream, and build. The problem only appears when imagination becomes a substitute for reality, when rehearsing becomes more comfortable than acting, when imagining conversations becomes easier than having them, and when imagining change becomes easier than creating it. And maybe that's the realization hidden underneath all of this. People who are addicted to imagining fake scenarios are rarely addicted to the scenarios themselves. They're often addicted to what the scenarios provide: a sense of certainty, a sense of control, a sense of closure, and a temporary escape from the unpredictability of real life. But the experiences that change your life will never happen inside your imagination. They happen in real conversations, real decisions, real risks, and real moments that your mind could never fully predict. So if you catch yourself disappearing into imaginary worlds, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It probably means your brain is trying to solve something. The question is whether those scenarios are helping you prepare for life or quietly helping you avoid it. I'm curious. When you imagine fake scenarios, which type do you find yourself creating most often? Replay scenarios, future fantasy scenarios, or disaster scenarios? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading every one of them. Because your imagination was never the problem. It was always the solution your mind reached for when reality felt like too much to face without a rehearsal. The question is whether you're still rehearsing or whether you're ready to walk out on stage. And if you enjoy exploring psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns behind the way people think and feel, subscribe for more videos like this.